Fire Sword Chapter 28 Recovery. 3 weeks had passed since Valm's conqueror was dethroned. The shepherds were back on the ships that would take them back home, back to Ylisse. Sinon, Celica, Sachi, Yuki, and Aiko were excited to head to the country, as it would be their first time since their arrival in this world. Although, Kazuto thought as he heard Yuki's cheery voice carrying out over the deck, Zekken and the Dragon Tamer seemed to be the most vocal about it. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, appreciating the salty, fresh air that held out over the ocean, the wind caressing his wings softly as they headed towards the home of Crom and his family. As he left his eyes shut, he thought back to the day before they had departed. "People of Valm," Sayri said to the gathered crowd of civilians, "the Conqueror is no more, and we are once more a free people." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Sayri smiled at the sight of her beloved homeland, Chonsin, free once more. The only pang of sadness in her heart was that Yanfei was not there to see it happen. Pushing aside the thought, she continued to speak from the podium. But this was not done by the resistance alone. No, we have had help from beyond the seas, and even further, the heavens themselves. The crowd began to murmur among themselves at her cryptic words as she went on to say, "The ones from across the sea are noble Elysians and the fierce Feroxi, who fought to save this land as if it were their own." She indicated Crom and Robin, who were standing beside the Khans, with a dramatic flourish, prompting them to step forward and wave to the applauding crowd with grins on their faces. "Please, lend them your ears, my people." And she stepped back. When the crowd had settled down, Crom said, "People of Chonsin, the people of Ylisse owe you and your princess a great debt. Without her, we could not have defeated the Conqueror. Her courage and self-sacrifice is something that should be remembered for all time, something I will see to personally when we return to Ylisse. A statue will be erected in our honor in the capital of my homeland, and her legacy will be made known to all of my subjects." As he stepped back with the Khans, his speech concluded. Robin, however, still had yet to speak, so he cleared his throat and said in the strongest voice he could muster, "While traveling through your land, we learned that your people chose to continue placing their faith in Naga, despite Walhart's decree." He paused for a moment to marshal his thoughts, while the people in the crowd marveled at his knowledge of their culture. When he was ready, he added, "The divine dragon heard your prayer, people of Chonsin. She graced us with warriors from above, warriors such as there have never been before." He pointed up to the sky, and the people gasped at what they saw. Kirito and the other warriors of Alfheim were all floating in the air on their wings. Every one of them were present, save for Yui, who was still back in her room with Lisa. They all looked down at the citizens below with varying expressions, ranging from open and friendly to quiet and reserved. Then, without any warning, they all shot off in different directions to land on various buildings and street areas, Kirito and Asuna making their landings next to Robin on either side of him. Kirito spread his arms wide in a welcoming gesture to the two of them to show the people that they were not to be feared, as he said, "Kirito and Asuna Kirigaya are two of the mightiest warriors I've ever met, and two of the kindest friends I've ever had." He smiled at the two of them as they flushed silently, and he finished by saying, "If every warrior were like them, we'd have no need for armies." "Well said indeed, Master Robin," Sayri said as she stepped back up to the front of the podium. "Now, thanks to your kinsmen and all that you have done for us, we too shall erect statues in your honor. And in the hall where the names of our history's greatest warriors are recorded, so there shall be a place for Klein, who gave up everything so that we might all have a chance to live." Her declaration was met by looks of surprise from the shepherds and a respectful applauding from the audience, who had been made privy to the knowledge of Klein's death and the circumstances behind it. Truly, it was a good day to go home. "Hey," Suguha said as she walked up to her brother. "How are you doing out here?" "I should be asking you that." Kazuto grinned as he turned to face his sister. "I'm used to this kind of thing. Well, more or less." He chuckled sheepishly and then continued, "But you've never had to deal with anything like this before. I mean, having your life in actual danger and all that. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," she giggled. "It's sweet of you to ask, though. The truth is..." She turned around to look out over the ocean with a delighted smile as she said, "I used to wonder what it would be like, getting to fight side by side with you in Sword Art Online. I never found that out, but I guess that this is a close second." "How do you mean?" he asked curiously. "Mr. Kikuoka told us that you were on the front lines from the beginning of the game," she explained. "At first I was so angry that you would risk your life like that, but as time went on, I started to admire you for it." She smiled at the memory of the day when she came to the realization that her brother was an amazing person, laying his life on the line so that others wouldn't have to. Eventually, I realized that I was proud of you, but even more, that I didn't want you to do it alone. And I wish that I could have been there with you, fighting to keep you safe, you know? I wasn't alone, though. Kazuto grinned. I had Asuna inclined to help me out. Okay, but I didn't know that, Suguha sighed. I was worried about you. I know, he said with that gentle smile of his as he gave her a one-armed hug. But all the same, I'm glad it was me and not you that got stuck in that game. Suguha was quiet for a moment, enjoying her time with Kazuto out in the open sea, not a care in the world. But then a thought stole into her mind like a thief, and she couldn't keep herself from asking, How is Yui? At those words, Kazuto's eyes went from peaceful to dark and sad. She's not doing well, he replied. She barely eats. She's losing weight. I don't think she's sleeping either. She's losing weight? Suguha gasped. But she was so small to begin with. I know, Kazuto said heavily, and she saw his shoulders slump with the weight of worry. That's why I came out here originally. I'm trying to figure out the right way to tell her that she did nothing wrong, that there are things that'll make all of this worth it. All the fear, pain, the loss. His eyes clouded over briefly, but he went on to say, I just don't know how to tell my little girl in a way that she'll understand. Suguha was at a loss for words. Kazuto, the man that had destroyed Aincrad and its creator, the one that had saved the captives of old Alfheim, defeater of Deathgun, and now the vanquisher of Walhart, was defeated by the fact that he could not bring himself to tell his daughter that her being forced to kill a man was not the wrong thing to do. She realized that he had never wanted to put her in such a position, that he had wanted her to stay pure, unstained by blood like him. She knew from talking to him and Sinon that not every blood stain can be scrubbed out of your skin, and now he just wanted a way to wash the blood from the hands of his little girl. That night, Sachi was plagued with doubts of her own. It was while the moon was at its zenith that she was standing on the prow of the ship, leaning on the railing while contemplating why in the world Naga had chosen to bring her back to life. All I've done since I came back is cause Kirito trouble, she thought. It made Asuna worry that I was going to try and steal her husband. I failed to take care of Yui when it mattered. Do I really belong here? A good evening, is it not, Lady Sachi? A soft-spoken male voice said, startling her. She turned around to see Marth, Robin's son, standing in the moonlight with a solemn expression on his face. I am sorry. I did not mean to startle you, he said as he moved to stand beside her. It's okay, she stammered. I've always been kind of afraid of my own shadow, so it's not your fault. Just mine. She sighed heavily, her eyes downcast. If I may say so, Lady Sachi, Marth said while looking at her intently, you seem to take much upon yourself, without cause, something my mother has been known to do. What do you mean? Sachi asked him. She sees all the suffering around her as a result of her inability to prevent it, oftentimes even when it has nothing to do with the Grimleal or their master, he said quietly. My grandfather and father have tried to tell her that she has done everything she could, more than anyone could expect of her. Yet it is never enough for her. But, I mean, I can kind of understand why she would be so hard on herself, Sachi said after a moment. I mean, she's the princess of a very special bloodline, one that saved the world a bunch of times. But before she's any of those things, she's human, Marth said patiently. Just like you. You know, she only has a few years on you, Lady Sachi. Yet in that time, she has accomplished so much for her people. Just imagine what you could do if you pushed yourself and stopped blaming yourself for things beyond your control. Me, she protested. What can I do? You can do whatever your heart is set on doing, Marth replied simply. If you truly want to become a person that you think Naga would think worth to restore life, then strive toward that ideal. How? Her voice was very small. I'm not a warrior. Not all the great people in history were warriors, Marth said simply. Some were scholars, some were healers, some were diplomats. Greatness is not always found on the battlefield. Often it can be found in the simple things that so many of us overlook. Things we warriors are deaf and blind to. What do you mean? Sachi asked, desperate to know how she becomes someone great like Kirito and the elite shepherds. I don't know, Marth said a trifle sadly. It's something my father told me back in my time when I was just a small child. I have longed to know what he meant ever since, but I guess I'm too much like the exalt side of my family. I'm too blind to hear the meaning of his words, and I'm too blind to see what it was that he was trying to tell me. But it's what he told me that day that I decided that I wanted to be a warrior, like the heroes of old. Like my mother, I suppose. But you're a great warrior, just like Crom and all them, Sachi said. How can you be doubting yourself? And you are one of the kindest people I've ever known, capable of putting people at ease with you in a way that I've never been able to. Marth replied with a slight smile. I admire that more than anyone's ability to swing a sword. Sachi's eyes widened and her face reddened a bit as she realized that he held her in as high regard as she held him and the other fighters. See, I may not know what it is my father wanted me to see or hear, Marth said, but I do know that you possess a gift, Lady Sachi, and a rare one at that. Just call me Sachi, she stammered, embarrassed without really knowing why. As you wish, he said with a slight dip in his head. I hope that I have been able to help you tonight. I'll take my leave now. As he turned to go, she caught him by the sleeve, but immediately drew back as if burned. He said as he turned around. Actually, do you mind staying out here to talk for a bit longer? She asked shyly. Marth simply smiled and stood beside her once again as he said, Of course, Sachi. Be my pleasure. Kazuto sighed silently as he looked in the doorway to his and Asuna's cabin aboard the ship. Yui was asleep in Asuna's arms, the young girl cradled by her mother. His daughter was finally getting much-needed rest, and for that he should be grateful. But the only thing he could focus on was how pale and weak she looked. She was even more fragile than when he had first found her in the forest of floor 22 of Sword Art Online, and the sight was either going to drive him mad or break his heart. He wasn't sure which would happen first. Maybe both would occur at the same time, and he'd wind up as a shell of his former self. He sighed again and turned to walk out of the room, deciding that he needed another walk to try and clear his dark thoughts. He was surprised when he ran into Shino, for it was late in the evening, and everyone else but the watch was supposed to be asleep. Trouble sleeping? She asked as she noticed him approaching without a word. Yui finally seems to be getting some rest with Asuna, so I didn't want to jump in and disrupt that, he replied. What about you? Still having nightmares? Shino grinned wryly and answered, You know me too well, Kirito. Part of being your friend, he replied with a slight grin. Need to talk about it? Nah, not tonight, but I appreciate it. She answered, What about you? Need to get something off your chest? Where would I start? He half joked. I'm really worried about Yui, of course, and I blame myself for letting her get put in the position that she did. But I feel like the worst part is that I'm trying to figure out a way to justify to her what happened, which I know I shouldn't. Do you need me to talk to her? Shino asked seriously, surprising Kazuto. If anyone can understand what's going on through her head right now, it would be me, and you know it. Well, yeah, but he hesitated. What is it? She asked. It's just that I'm the only one you talked to about that day and what it did to you, he said. Would you really be okay with talking to her about it? If she's your daughter, I think my secrets will be safe. Shino smiled gently. Believe me, I'm not too hyped up about the idea of talking to anyone about what happened, but if she needs someone that understands what's going through her head, I can be that person. And who knows, maybe she'll put things in a new light for me, too. She does do that from time to time. Kazuto smiled a bit. Let me know when she wakes up tomorrow, okay? Shino said. I'll go for a fly with her if she's up for it. Just be careful, okay? Kazuto said after considering it a moment. If she gets too weak to fly, I don't want to have her falling into the ocean. Kirito, I promise that she'll be safe with me. Shino said as she extended her fist. I'll protect her no matter what. And besides, it's not like we're heading toward a battle or anything. Famous last words, Kazuto said, but he couldn't stop a slight smile from breaking through again. All right, I'll let you take her flying tomorrow. Just don't push her too hard. And he bumped fists with his friend, the promise sealed. Maybe, just maybe, Shino could set Yui on a path to recovery. Alright, so the Shepherds are back on their way to Ylisse for the first time for some of them. I decided that a filler chapter might be appropriate at this point. Get a little bit of character development going for some of the characters that we haven't heard from in a little while, but we still know pretty well, you know, like Sachi and Marth, and then there's Sinon talking to Kirito. Also Sugaha a little bit. I guess this was a chapter for the background characters to come into play a little bit. And I always like doing that. I like developing on the potential that I feel is often wasted with side characters. So yeah, other than that, really not much to say on this chapter. No sense of impending doom, not too much of that. Sinon's going to try and talk to Yui about what happened because, like she mentioned, she was put in a pretty similar position when she was a kid. So I'll have to wait till next chapter to see how that goes. But special thanks to Mr. Will Underwood, who's my top Patreon supporter so far. Means the world to me, dude. And thanks to all you guys as well for coming to listen to this audio series. I've really enjoyed doing it. I'm glad that people are enjoying listening to it. So please be sure, like and subscribe, share with your friends, and until next time, have a good one. Red Swordsman out.